Hi, everyone. So today I want to talk a little bit about the times when we are all going through turbulence. And the turbulence, generally, what I mean by that is things are suddenly very weird, strange, and volatile. And we all have this. I'll kind of give you a little bit of a background of why I'm talking about this. So earlier today, I got the keys to my car to drive our little furry friend here to his other furry friend's house so that they could play together. And I grabbed my keys. I was in a hurry, in a rush, trying to be aware, as best I can, which, let's be real, isn't always great. But I grabbed my keys and I ran down the stairs and I put the leash on our little buddy and loaded him up into the truck and was about to drive away when I didn't know where my keys went. We've all been there, for all the car owners out there, forgetting your keys, or even just keys to other stuff. Yeah, where'd my keys go? I mean, that's sort of a very common adult problem that we have if we like to lock things up. So I was in the midst of this problem, and it was a very strange problem because I had very clearly remembered grabbing them, and then they weren't where I expected them to be, which is in my pocket or in my hand. They weren't there. So eventually I found them. But even still, where they ended up being was a bit mysterious. They were on the dog, which, how did they get there? The dog was already loaded into the car. They were like adjacent on top of the dog. So what I must have done, this is what I'll say. This is how the mind works, right? I have no idea how they got there. But we suddenly go, well, what must have happened was this and this and this and this and this. So what must have happened is I was being unmindful and I held my keys in my hand and I just threw the leash in there and threw the keys along with it. Right? I just told you a story, a possible story. And so then I drove along. And on my drive was normal. Everything went accomplished, dropped him off at his friend's house and then came back. And now I'm talking to you. So there was no other strangeness that I noticed, but there was a feeling of what's going on here. This is a little bit funny. And what does this all mean? And generally, this can cause us a lot of stress. And we become spooked out sometimes. Like, what the heck is going on? Where is this all going? Who is involved in this? Is it really me? I don't remember thinking this. I don't remember putting it there. I don't remember. And suddenly we're trapped a bit in our own thoughts about what should be and what shouldn't be the case or real or whatever is happening to us. What should or shouldn't be what's happening to us. And this is, if you followed some of the other videos, this can be a problem. There's that one on interpretation that's out there. And, we're interpreting. But this is a pretty specific type of interpretation. This is one where you kind of feel a little bit like there's a rug pull. Like someone's playing a little joke on you. How is this happening? I would never do that. How did this occur? Some of us have a little bit more connection with these types of things than others. Some of us have like a trend like this. For example, every time I go to the mailbox, I can't open it, or there's some issue, or every time I log into my computer, there is some sort of weirdness that happens with this one program, or the computer in general. Whatever the case, or when I have this thought, or when I see this thing, the electricity goes out. There's all sorts of these. And out of these can come some pretty serious superstitions that are not necessarily helpful to us, and also can cause us, again, stress. We can feel nervous, and like we're being tormented, even if it's not by, a lot of us these days we don't believe in like that kind of stuff, right? But we still feel like out of sorts, and this is uncomfortable. What is this? What is going on here? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And so one of the cognitive behavioral therapy mechanisms that's oftentimes used, and it's used in a lot of other spiritual traditions too, is reframing. And it can be helpful, but the thing about reframing is when you're reframing and you're thinking that it's not really true, then the reframing doesn't necessarily work very well. You're kind of reframing, but you're not aware. It's sort of like you're telling a lie to yourself. You know what I mean? But what's interesting is that really what we should be doing is, if we're not totally reframing it and saying, oh, well, this is actually something else, this is all part of a master plan. There's a lot of people, God's plan, there's plan, whatever. And I'm not saying that that's not true for you, and that isn't necessarily a good way to think about it. If it works for you, it works, right? But for a lot of people, that doesn't work. And it actually causes more disdain, or like, oh, this is just too creepy. That we have so little control, and sometimes it can be really in our face, like, how did these keys get there? I'm the only one at home. That kind of thing. And the dog surely didn't, eat them or something. So, how did this occur, So I want to kind of propose a bit of doubt into the way that we think things ought to happen. So the way that we think things ought to happen is in a story, kind of a story like I told you. But that can actually still cause a bit of a disturbance, because when we tell the story to ourselves, like what I must have done was throw the keys with the leash into the car, there's a bit of the mind that goes, but I didn't see you do that. So did you really do that? We're not so sure that story is true. And this can cause a lot of it's very subtle, but it can cause a lot of again, this latent, unsettled feeling. Like, sure, that's the story, bub, me. That's the story. But I'm not so sure that that's the case. And I don't want to get into there's a lot of mental disorders out there that, hallucinations and things like that, psychoses, can be a real problem. So it's good to recognize that we don't know, because if you are somebody with these types of mental disorders or psychoses, admitting that we don't know actually makes it so that we potentially can get help and heal. We're more open to different types of solutions, medications, therapies. We're open to that if we say, maybe I didn't throw them in there. Maybe I'm hallucinating, or, whatever. Now, you don't want to go too far in that direction if you don't have a disorder, or this isn't a very common thing for you, because if you go too far, then you'll start to like create a bit of your own psychosis, the psychoses, in others' cases. So, but, to kind of put it plainly, the stories that we tell ourselves, and this is what I really want to point to, is the stories we tell ourselves are stories. They make our world. I don't know how the keys got there, but the story I told is very rational, right? And it's not a bad story because it's rational, it makes sense, and to be honest, it sort of shows that there's some sanity going on. But if we really grip to it, like that must be the only case, then we don't open ourselves up to something that is possibly greater and much more intuitive and potentially healing in our just general mind nature. And what I mean by this is there are those who, on September 11th, 2001, didn't go into work that day because they had a feeling, because they had a weird feeling. There were people that had all sorts of things that obstructed them to do the do the going to work or having the meeting and things like that. And generally, when that kind of thing happens, we have a big tendency to say, that's, if we're late to a meeting, for example, or we have some sort of issue with getting to work, we can be very enraged. And, obviously, for those that are prone to rage, we can be very enraged. But there's others that are just, frustrated, have less intense feelings. Like frustrated or just feeling like just downtrodden, what's going on? Why is my day so weird and I'm not able to accomplish what I want to accomplish. I'm not even able to go into work. I have this important meeting. I have this important interview. I have this important thing to do. But it's just not happening today. There's all these weird things going on. Why? What is this? And so obviously there's a rational story, right? The rational story is there's nothing going on. It's just a normal day, right? And we're telling ourselves that there's something going on, and that's actually causing us some distress. So we should actually say no, recognize that it's 100% not necessarily any of that. It's not necessarily anything weird out of the ordinary. It's just, something that was good to be mindful of. That, maybe we're a little bit more unmindful. Possibly when I threw my keys in the truck today, it was unaware, right? So I'm having a little awareness problem today. Maybe I have an aspiration to be more aware. And that's all good. That's all helpful in our lives. Also, after we do that little storytelling about what all of the reasons are that this is happening and how they all make sense, and they're rational, and things, lead to other things, and it's true, things do cause and effect. I grabbed the keys and they ended up in the next to the dog. That must have been something that happened from, they were in my hand, so then they were released, so I let them go. But it's also helpful to leave a bit of a door open to the mystery. Now, I don't mean a mystery in necessarily like a very high woo-woo way. If that's your thing, that's totally cool. You probably know more about that than I do. But what I'm talking about is really should be accessible to anybody of any faith and atheists. This is really non-biased here. And this is really opening ourselves up to the fact that we do not know. That actually it's very helpful to admit that we don't know. Because once we admit that we don't know fully, then we are open. Now, I'm not saying we're open to like the woo-woo necessarily, unless that's your thing. I'm saying that we're open to our own interpretations being wrong. We're open to the fact that if we are not 100% right, then maybe things are still okay. And this is a sense of being okay with being a little out of control. Not having control of our environment, not knowing how it all works. If we're open to that, then we'll remain curious towards the world without feeling upset that our interpretations or our expectations didn't come to pass. So there are all sorts of serendipitous experiences that people from every background on this earth talk about that have happened, that happen sometimes. And these can happen in ways that we don't expect. And when we're open to the, I would say, strangeness of reality, that sometimes things can be a little bizarre, and we don't shy away from that. We just say, well, that was a little funky, but that's okay. That's okay too. Then we're open to the unknown. We're open to learning. We're open to new perspectives. And I'm not saying that we should go full bore into new perspectives and then grasp tightly to them, What I'm saying is remaining in that state of openness towards all these different possibilities. If we remain in that, then we are able to feel a lot freer, and a lot less tormented or imprisoned by these types of events in our lives that happen all the time, that occasionally lead us off the normal course. All good stories start with that. It wasn't an expected turn of events, but it ended up leading us on a different path that was more fulfilling, possibly, or had hidden treasures in our lives. A lot of people with their romantic partners, it started with similar situations. A magical moment, all these things didn't line up before, but then all of a sudden something changed. And when we're open to the world around us in a way that invites or allows, I guess, we don't want to invite so much that we're thinking that that's really the way things are either. But it engages with some of the mystery, that there can be something mysterious, and that our expectations aren't really the full story necessarily. Then we are much lighter. We're not so tense, and we're also not heavy when things don't go in the right direction in our own minds, in our own experiences. We can instead feel like things maybe not are all part of God's plan, unless, of course, you really feel that way and that resonates with you, but that it is part of your life. And even though it didn't necessarily make sense to you, by being just part of your experience, it is valid. And in that validity has the potential to teach you something or engage you in some new way and potentially lead you into delightful or new good experiences if you remain, again, open. Now, there is probably a way to get a bit fixated to this. So I do want to just, caveat it with, if if everything that happens to you, you're like, wow, this is like a mystery, and then you just start going in all these weird directions, you might get very distracted. So there's, certain people, and myself, I've been one in the past, where I get very distracted by things, and new things will arise. And I'm like, whoa, that's so cool. And then you kind of go towards that way, and then all of a sudden another thing, oh, that's so interesting, and go in that direction. So I'm not saying that necessarily everything in your life should be engaged in and just go down the rabbit holes of every little thing. But let your intuition guide you. And if something arises that is a little weird, don't, try if this works for you. Try not getting upset. Try going with it. See what happens. See if there's anything behind that corner. And maybe there's nothing there. Today there wasn't. I mean, other than this video, I guess, But, besides that, there wasn't. There wasn't any other weird things I saw. There wasn't any near misses, really. Except, there was an interesting... I live in a rural area. There was a group of turkeys that I got to see when I returned. And when I saw the turkeys, I got to wish them well. And they made some nice little sounds that I hadn't heard turkeys make before. Maybe that was it. But I don't know. Whatever it is there is a magic. There can be a magic to life. And I don't mean in any sort of way beyond actually a very silly, mundane way. But when things kind of come a knocking on that old head and kind of say, "Hey, wake up here! Be aware. Something's happening." It's sometimes good to heed. And to listen, because maybe there's something interesting that you're going to see or feel. Maybe there's something out there that's going to change your life for the better. Thank you.